Good morning. This is Joe Wenberg, Bluebird Semaphore. This video clip is going to be World History for Ordinary People 24. Let me just say a couple of words about the selection of ordinary rather than what another person talking on these subjects may have used the word common. And that got my hackles up when I was thinking about what to call this, because one thing you could say about human beings is that they're anything but common. So people who continue to use common to reference humans, whether individually or in general, haven't really thought it out yet, the implications of their word. Ordinary is, in my estimation, a much better word to use because there's no negative implications in the word ordinary. You know, a rocket ship going to the moon could be called an ordinary rocket ship going to the moon. I don't see any slur there. So I just wanted to say that. But we're going to get back on East Asia today. And although you may not think so, because what I'm going to talk about is going to be seen like it's all over the planet. But fortunately, get this, folks, a library opened up over the past week. And when I heard about it, it was already past noon on last Saturday. And I quickly looked at this, and they're going to close at 1, and they're about 15-minute drive away. So I rushed over there. I don't even have a card from this library. But, you know, I went there because I'm a resident of this county, this particular municipality. It was Avalon on the shore here. They said, yeah, you could get a card, you know, just fill out this, and so on and so forth. And while they were finishing the paperwork, I rushed down because time was of the essence here. So they were going to close in 15 minutes. I rushed down to history and quickly found the books they had on Asia and China. It wasn't a lot, but, you know, I quickly picked out a number of titles. And the two that were definitely Asian, well, actually three. One was one of these Fedor travel guides, China, which is nice to see. Hey, two things: what all these places look like today, and maps for geographically locating where these places are. And the maps are pretty. The granularity is pretty good. You get to see, and not like you might in a larger map where everything's condensed. So that was China. Then the other thing that had to do with Asia was a book on the Silk Road, relatively new publication, I think 2016, and one on like a travel log, but a high-end travel log, a very much admired travel writer. Can't think of his name right now. It's Colin something. And it's called To a Mountain in Tibet. And I'm starting to like that. Of course, it's not pertinent that much to the East Asia, although it has its hooks. And then there's this one I said, the one on the Silk Road, and it actually says like a new interpretation of the world or something like that, part of the title. And man, so that's where I got sidetracked. This thing is like I think I'm going to be reading about the Far East, but I'm reading about the Middle East and the Near East primarily. Once in a while, getting into the Far East in this book. Now, granted, it's eventually will get mostly into the Far East, but the background history for the Silk Road is so immersed in the Middle East, the Near East, the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, and mentions of cultures that dig even deeper into Europe. But the point that I got so far is that, hey, there's no Silk Road without trade. None. So the author is compelled to talk about these trade routes that when I think of Silk Road, I'm thinking, maybe 600 AD, 700 AD. Every now and then I see a reference that, trade routes, even in the BC, very old, very ancient, but no, we don't necessarily call them the Silk Road. But, when you think of it, this is the start, this is the genesis of this vast trade that went through the Middle East, the Near East, Central Asia, the Far East, North and South, East and West. It was going on for centuries. And as the author makes the claim, this area of the world was indeed the center of the world, with some of the greatest metropolitan urban centers at that time. And so, anyway, I came away with some new places that I had never heard of before, and I'm only probably going to mention one. And I'll spell the word first: Sogdian, Sogdian, something like that. And you can see this. You see the one square with the X in it? That's Sogdian, and it is just to the east, not just, quite a few hundred miles east of the Caspian Sea. You see the X? Well, why do I bring that up? Because they were the great traders, the great ones, before, primarily in the nuts and bolts of the Silk Road days. And I am bowled over by what I've learned about these people in the little bit that I read about them. But first of all, their script is just unbelievably beautiful. Masterworks of art that you can't believe. But their script, and it looks like that, I don't want to call it Eastern or Oriental, or, you know what I'm talking about, Chinese sort of characters, but not Chinese characters. It's a mixture of the Islamic, Arabic scripts and the Hebrew scripts and the Greek scripts, but it's just beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. And these people, because they did well in their commercial aspirations, they had the luxury to become a little more scholarly, a little more well-read, well-versed. They were all around not all around, but they had spread out far and wide, and they learned much from their travels. So, and what we find remnants of these people still in China. They were there. They most likely settled, which was quite a regular phenomenon in the Silk Road days, that these people that made up the caravans would just settle wherever they had gone. So and that brought up a point that I was thinking about when I read the other book about to a mountain in Tibet, was that as they're walking through the higher hills that come out of the Ganges Plain and then up the Himalayas, this is in the area of Nepal, they're walking up higher and higher, and they come across these immensely poor people living in tremendous poverty, hanging on to the cliffs, basically, as their homes are. Poverty like you don't know. And I said, well, how did these people wind up here? Are the people down in the plains chasing them out? I don't know. But one of the things I fantasized was that back when the trade routes were flourishing, the trade routes that were on foot and on camel, that some of these people just were enthralled by the beauty, the grandeur getting up into the lower Himalayan, the hills, 8,000 feet, 9,000 feet. And some of them decided that, it's just not worth it to go on. Why don't I just stay here and try to live out my life in this absolute paradise? That's theory, just fantasizing. But then they probably soon found out that they still had to eat, and it's very difficult to do agriculture on those cliff sides up in the lower Himalayas. But they had made their deal, and there they stood in the generations after generations, and finally you learn how to survive in those extreme conditions, extreme from a point of view of wealth, which there was none or there is none. So that's just an aside in all of this, but because certainly the trade routes did go across the Himalayas in specific points where the passing was easy enough. Nothing's easy on that Silk Road, though, you can be sure of that. So, and the reason why I drew this map was to kind of perhaps talk about what I believe is the Silk Road deals. Because, as I said, let's point out this. In the early days, certainly the trade goods were coming down out of Egypt because they had passed through, say, areas of Europe. And they'd come down through Egypt along the west side of the Red Sea. Okay? And then they had to pass over to Arabia. Okay, so they get on the west coast of Arabia, and what do? They go up that mountainous region that the west side of Arabia has, and they get up, and now they're in the Middle East, and they make their right turn into Asia Minor, and they keep on trekking, and some of their treks take them over the Caspian Mountains, over the Black Sea, on top of the Caucasus, not the Caspian Mountain, the Caucasus. Take them over the Caspian Sea and over this area north, way north of Sogdian, that X, place with the X. Takes them over there, and about here, north of there, is a major stop on the Silk Road. I think it's called Kashgar or something like that. And at that point, I believe anyway, that the other alternative route, which some of it was trekking on land through what is now Iran and Persia, and coming under this, and then going north and meeting there. And so the two different approaches would meet at Kashgar. That was one alternative, and then continuing east until they got to their destinations in East Asia. The other would be coming up from this secondary route, which was partially by sea, across the Arabian Sea, into India, and then heading up, going through the Himalayas, and then going below the great desert basins that the other route was going over the top to Temecula Desert, the Tarman Basin, and this other one was coming around the bottom and then trekking through East Asia to their final destination. So that's my general interpretation of the Silk Road. But be that as it may, the world didn't wake up one day and say, oh, Interstate Highway 195 is complete, you're now free to travel it. They didn't say that about the Silk Road. It evolved over centuries and centuries. Little pieces were added on. The traders exchanged information. They talk of better routes. They talk of how to just do this better. The gains, the rewards were astronomical. That's why they did it. That's why they suffered these arduous journeys to just carry the commerce, the produce, the products of the East, carry them to the West, and then carry the products from the West, carry them to the East. And behind it all, the creme de la creme product was always silk. Silk moving west. Silk moving west. And the Romans, of course, were big on getting this. So that's where we get the route down through the east side, no, the west side of the Red Sea, through Egypt, and then across the Red Sea into Arabia. All this. Now, when you read a little bit about historically familiar names like Cleopatra and who's that queen? The Queen of Sheba. You'll see where they're talking about trading, and that's where King Solomon got his gold. But they just say he's got a lot of gold, and but to drill down a little further, he more than likely got his gold from Ethiopia and those places. He could have also got his gold from coinage down from Rome and so on. And so this was taking place over the eons, hundreds of years, centuries. And then at some point it became, major driving force that created the great region of East Asia, the richest, most developed land on the planet, maybe tenfold compared to the rest, the Westerns, in their high, exalted opinion of themselves. They really weren't. And it's no wonder that the Eastern folks out in East Asia thought of these people as fleas. They were nothing but fleas. People come from the West. To just be smacked off. There was no comparison. And even in their philosophies and their theologies and so on, it's just hard to match the West with the East. The West was, when it comes to theology, they were always at odds with each other. And as a matter of fact, it's probably why they never really dominated in the early centuries of the new era, in other words, the AD era. They really never dominated the world at all. They, until, the sheer magnitude of their military might, the West would overshadow the East for a while. That may be changing, but the point is that the West were just beating each other up. The Huns settled throughout Germany and other parts of Asia after a certain amount of fighting here and there. Now, be that as it may, we talk a lot about the Huns, and I'm just bringing this in because the Huns came out of Central Asia, and they were being driven out by the Chinese. Don't forget that. So they only really were a superpower for less than 100 years. So even though some reference books call Attila the most important figure in ancient history, and my wife asked me, well, how would they know that? I said, well, this is the way, probably. There are always historians writing. And so contemporary, present-day historians read all these other historians and they say, you know what? Attila's name comes up 100 times more than any other name in all these writings. So, therefore, we conclude he was the most important person in that era. And I say, not a bad deduction, because if you're always naming this person, then that person must be very important, maybe the most important. You know, it's the same with today in our news. Certain people get mentioned over and over and over and over and over and over and over. You know, so you wind up saying, well, they must be important, even though in today's day and age, quite frankly, nobody's important. It's a mob rule civilization that we have now. So the mob is important. That's who's important. But so I'm now gradually moving east on this opening vista that I've had, that the Silk Road passing through the Near East, the Middle East, Asia Minor, under the Caspian Sea, over the Caspian Sea, into Central Asia. Central Asia, a huge landmass made up a number of those other countries that all end in STAN, and then finally, after Central Asia smack touching up with China, you know, not in a straight line. It's inundated. China, especially in the northwest, bumps significantly towards the west, and also China bumps significantly towards the south, into the Himalayas and so on. And so what I'll conclude simply by saying on this World History Ordinary People 24 that the Silk Road made all the difference in the world to establishing East Asia as the grand civilization of that era. Without the Silk Road, there's no East Asia the way we know it today. Also, I'll mention, I've come across some older National Geographics. I was hoping to find some maps. And still plugged in them. I found a few maps, but not relative to the Far East. But maybe someday I'll be able to use them. But what I did find, an article about the Grand Canal. This is circa 1937. Grand Canal, photographs all over the place, like you always get in National Geographic. And the one, I'm going to read that, and then I'll regurgitate it on these video clips. But one of the things I did like, there was one little map, you know, like a half a page, showing the Grand Canal, the route that it takes. It's the largest man-made waterway in the world, over 1,000 miles. It's unbelievable. What they did is they connected lakes and streams with ditches that they dug. But what was about this map that I just loved is that the part that all the way on the right, they show a little bit of Korea, you know, and then they show in parentheses underneath it Japan. You know, Japan was, you know, it took over Korea at the time, and the authors of that magazine with that presentation make it seem quite ordinary that they would do this, nothing to remark about. And they talk about it, what Japan is doing in the country a little bit along the Grand Canal, as if it was the rightest thing to do, was to take over another country. Hey, why not? You know, listen, everybody does it. So, I mean, if I was the editor, I would have at least excluded that mention of Japan while I'm talking about China, because everybody knew even then that China hated the idea of having the Japanese rule over them. Hated it. How would you like to have your town council be made up of people from Scandinavia, you know, native citizens of, say, Scandinavia, or say Germany, or Portugal? How would you like that? I don't think you would like it very much. And the Chinese didn't either. And I think the editors back then, 1937, that would be the editors of National Geographic, were a little insensitive to the feelings of the Chinese people. But in 1937, nobody gave a hoot about sensitivity. Now, of course, we're all about sensitivity. you know, and like Ezra Pound said, or whatever the poet's name, a rose by any other color is still a rose, or a rose by any other name is still a rose. So civilizations, human nature, you can call it what you want, sensitive, insensitive, it's always going to be the same. Human nature. Human nature is human nature. Like it or not, learn to live with it. That's what my suggestion is. But I'm the minority voice here. And on that point, I'm going to say thanks for listening. Come and see me again. Maybe I'll have that Grand Canal ready for you. Okay? Here we go. Bang, it's off.